Welcome back to this episode of Faith Infused Leadership. I am your co-host, Meredith Benka, here with your host, Debbie Heiser. And today we're going to talk about a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, and one that I think has become very important to you too, Debbie, which is the idea of your physical health as a leader and how it's important to take care of you, your body, as well as all the other things that we've talked about on this show. So what got you excited about this topic for today?
Yeah, Meredith, I think what got me, well, not I think, I know what got me excited about this is that I do believe firmly that we have to have holistic health in order to be our best selves. And if I'm going to be my best self as a leader, then I have to look at all of those components, my spiritual health, my emotional and mental health, my intellectual health, my physical health.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about physical health, we're in kind of ending the first quarter here as you are listening to this or watching this. And it's so important at the beginning of the year, we always tend to make these goals around, and I'm really excited about internal game. Meaning there is a plan and you have to have a plan about it, but you have to also look at internally why, if you haven't been doing certain things and taking care of yourself or honoring yourself healthily, what's the internal script that's going on inside your mind. So I've been doing a lot of investigating in that personally, and I'm kind of excited to share some of the things that I've been uncovering.
Okay, well, shoot, tell us about it. Tell us about them.
Well, one of the things, I'm going to talk a little bit about diet and exercise, which I know are kind of the things that everybody talks about. But one of the things that I realized is that I had this internal script in my mind that typically when I go to the gym and work out, or if I ski all day, I come home, and if I ski all day, I'm usually sore the next day. But if I work out and I'm lifting weights, 2 days later, it's like I'm hanging onto the walls to sit down to go to the restroom, right? Like my legs are hurting and my muscles are hurting, and I drink a lot of water. So the lactic acid was still sitting in there, even though I was trying to flush it out. And so I realized I had this thought around it. Well, I'd been taking this new vitamin regimen for about a month, and then started to do some of this belief restructuring. And I thought, what if I told myself that 2 days later, I'm not going to hurt? And so I did that. And I started saying, you know what, instead of me continuing to say 2 days later, I'm going to hurt, or it's so hard to get to the gym. Well, really, it's that easy. It's that easy to just go park your car and walk in the door. And the funny story that I have to tell around this is that one day, I fairly recently, because I've been doing some of this belief mind structure in the last few months, I actually thought, you know what, I'm just not in the mood to go. It was one of those days where I was going to work out in the morning. I had a couple of shifts with clients. So I thought, okay, I'll take my stuff and do it after work. I'll meet with these clients early. Then they ended up being sick. Like my whole day just kind of blew up, right? So not only from the stress of just all of the change during the day, I should have gone, but I thought, okay, I'll work out after work. So literally after work, I drove around the gym twice. There's windows. So I was looking to see how packed it was. You know, were those people in there that are constantly like hogging the weight machines that I like? And, you know, like totally doing the scammer, like looking in the windows. Twice I drove around the block.
Once wasn't enough.
No. So then I thought, nope, I'm not going to work out. So I go to the post office. And as I'm getting in my car from grabbing my mail, I thought, you know what? The law of cause and effect says we're always in cause. Whatever we're doing, we're always in a cause. It just depends on what effect we want. Well, for me, my goal in 2020 was around some physical health, around creating longevity in my life. And so part of that longevity is being strong physically. And so that's part of why I have a weightlifting routine as well as skiing and yoga for longevity. And so I thought, okay, Debbie, you're always in cause. So what effect do I want? So I turned around and I went to the gym and I worked out.
Awesome.
But I had to have that belief restructuring. And what was interesting is it was that same week that I noticed that even though I had mentally said, I'm not going to be sore 2 days later, I actually noticed that I wasn't sore.
Mm.
And so I attribute a high percentage of that to my mental reprogramming, but another high percentage to this vitamin regime that I started.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't want to go too far on the vitamin piece of it, but I am at this point in time in my life where I'm perimenopausal. And I had this fatigue, Meredith, that literally, I mean, I'm a high energy person. I'm out and about. I do a lot of things in the community. I do a lot of things at home. And I was at this point that by Saturday and Sunday, I was so exhausted. I was having a hard time getting out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just did not ever feel rested.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was causing sleep interruptions because I was so fatigued that I would go 2 or 3 days and wake up in the middle of the night, and then bam, I would sleep so hard it felt like I was taking NyQuil or something, right? Like I just woke up almost in a sleep hangover.
Yeah.
And I started to notice after a month of being on these vitamins, the energy level that I had was back. At full force. I am not sore, so that tells me those vitamins are also working to create the right setup in my body so that the lactic acid doesn't stay in my muscles, and
Mm-hmm.
just so many positive benefits about it. And I'm sleeping better. So all of those things I look at and I think, as a leader, how can I show up as my best self? And part of that is taking care of myself physically. I know I have an allergy to whey. If I put things in my mouth with whey, almost immediately I have an effect to that because we're always in cause. And the next day I'm lethargic. I have a lot of, running nose, itchy eyes, those types of things. And so it's then about reprogramming and saying, do I want those effects? So really it kind of goes with the law of cause and effect too.
Well, and one of the things I'm noticing in listening to you talk about this, and I totally want your take on it too. You find yourself a leader at some point in your life, through promotion, through sometimes, just sheer circumstance, whatever it might be. And there isn't really anywhere in like the leadership guidebook, whether that's your mentor or studying that you're doing or whatever it is, that really talks about the physical requirement of stepping into that leadership, right? Of the energy that it's going to take physically to be on, the energy that it's going to take to be inspiring, to make decisions, to do those things. We don't talk about that very much. And in my experience, I found that toll for physically for a leader is significant.
Yeah.
And it's just, I hope we start to have more conversation around it, because I look back in my life and know, I could have made better choices when I was needed in a role as a leader that probably would have helped me step into it more fully.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's interesting too, because as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about a podcast I listened to recently, and I may have mentioned that in this one. It's called The Happiness Lab.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking to Adriana Huffington, who has the Huffington Post, and about the importance of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And how we almost wear as a badge of honor that we only slept 3 hours, right? Or we only slept 4 hours last night and I'm still functioning, but like she literally had, like physically, she just dropped, because she wasn't getting sleep, and the importance of sleep. And so when I think about physical health and showing up at your best self, I think back, as you're saying that, in my past, and making sure that I'm taking care of myself, and it goes to diet, it goes to exercise, it goes to supplementing, because I'm sorry, unless you grow your own garden, we're not getting the same nutrition that we used to get out of the foods that we eat. And eating clean is difficult. I mean, even buying something organic doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't cross-contaminated by a field a half a mile away or whatever. Those are just facts of life. And so having that and making sure that every once in a while you do a cleanse.
Yeah.
To help your liver out, because we live in so many different toxic environments. Making sure too that we're not sleeping with our devices. 5G, those wireless things. If we had to walk through, I had a body worker one time who I just adore, Beata, who talk to me about that, how we are programmed to, there's positive and negative ions.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to mix it up. I don't know which one is which.
Mm-hmm.
But the point being is that like all this Wi-Fi, if we had to walk through tape, so like think about those old VHS tapes, that
Yeah.
kind of tape. If you had tape crossing how many like Wi-Fi connections and electricity things that are creating the ions that are kicking us out of balance,
Mm-hmm.
you could barely walk through a room
Yep.
because of it. And the earth is grounding.
Mm-hmm.
So we used to walk barefoot a lot, which would help us ground those negative and positive ions and balance them out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we live in a world today, I can't remember the last time I went barefoot on the grass.
Right.
And so, you know, like even thinking about that, and when you sleep with your devices next to you, like I literally, and I will promise to all of us listening to this, that by the end of this week, I'm going to go buy an alarm clock, because I use my phone as an alarm clock, and it sits right next to me on my nightside table.
Yeah.
And so like just that physical health, there's things that are happening around us. And I started that off by talking about toxins. And so the toxins are not just liver related, but also other outside areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that too. There's so much interconnectedness, right? Because it's about thinking about what you want out of your physical section of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about even the phone next to me, that's really about environment. What do you want your environment to look like?
Well, and I also think, you know, when we, for me, I think health is our most important asset, but also the one that we take for granted probably the most. Because if you're motivated to be this leader, if you're motivated to serve and to give, and you know, and here in this space we talk a lot about faith, and your faith is leading you toward that. Maybe your calling is leading you to do it. Then I view it as a responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
The health piece, because there are people relying on you. And if you're not placing yourself in your best position, you know, to be a leader, then health is definitely a piece of it. I'd love to have you talk a little bit about, I do think that health can be challenging in the workplace. Mm-hmm. I know when I worked in corporate, and we were, you know, just heads down on big projects or launches or busy seasons, you know, food would be brought in all the time. And there was always this, or there was always a Costco run, or, you know, whatever it was. And a lot of the time it wasn't great choices. And I think that still exists today in the workplace. So how do you coach and help people through, you know, ways and ideas that they can make choices in their busy lives, to keep those things at the forefront, right? It's just all too easy to grab another donut, you know, from the box for, you know, somebody's birthday that day, than it is to remember to, you know, bring your veggies or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, the first thought was, oh, the same thing everybody else always says, plan for it and bring things, you know, and I do have a sack of these cashew clusters from Costco. Mm-hmm. And I think like a fairly large handful is like 150 calories, and, you know, they're nuts, and it has a little honey in it, that I keep around so that if I find that I'm not going to have time to eat lunch, and, you know, or whatever, I can pop a few of those in my mouth until I have a chance to go find some food somewhere, you know, because also I can't show up as my best self if I'm super hungry. Mm-hmm. But it goes back to this law of cause and effect. So if there's donuts sitting there, now don't get me wrong, I think too it's way okay to have a donut if you want a donut. It's not this all or nothing, I have to be perfect kind of thing, which I think so many diet plans focus on. You've got to be perfect. You got to stick exactly with this exact thing, right? So then we go into this deficit mode and scarcity mode versus abundance. Mm-hmm. And if I look at it and think, whatever's happening, and I'm at work and we've got our heads down, we're doing these projects, people are bringing in these things. We used to have Thirsty Thursdays, and people would go to Sonic and get Route 44s, you know, during happy hour, and bring in stuff all the time. And so it's really about understanding what your true motivation is behind your health. Like when I switched mine to longevity, that was a huge shift for me. Mm-hmm. And then it's about thinking about,
what did you switch it from?
What I switched it from was I wanted to lose 40 pounds. Mm-hmm. And then I realized, as I started to investigate that and really look at that, I realized part of why I wanted to lose 40 pounds. And when I say I'm going to lose 40 pounds, that implies I'm going to find it again. And let me tell you, through my life, I've lost and found that a lot of times. So now I'm looking at it that I'm letting go of this weight. I'm
Really.
letting go of the excess that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And so when I switched it to longevity, and I've talked before about how I wanted to be strong, but that wasn't the heart of the why. The heart of the why for me is I want to have longevity. Now, my son and his wife are both 27, and I want to be around when my grandchildren get married.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, they need to start getting going on having babies, but but secondly, when I think, people are getting married later in life, so 30 years from now, I'm going to be 83 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be of sound mind and sound body and be able to get around and do things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that switched it for me. And so you asked like what I changed it from.
Yeah.
That was the mental switch with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that why is super important to understand. And so going back to how do I look at the donut and realize I don't want it, a big piece of it is cause and effect. If I think about the fact that the law of cause and effect says that for every effect, there's some kind of action or cause that creates that effect. Well, I'm always in cause. It goes back to that story about going to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always in cause. So what effect do I want to have?
And so one thing I think I want to hear you talk about a little bit more too is um, compulsive behavior versus allowing ourselves the time to think about the choice we're about to make.
Yes.
And I think that there's a it's underlying here. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I was watching a documentary and it showed a woman who was binging to get rid of her feelings and her emotions. And a lot of times it is directly tied to emotional stuffing. And she had this like donut that was like a dog toy, and it squeaked every time she like,
Uh-huh.
and the point is that don't squeak the donut. So meaning that when you started to feel the urge, squeak the donut to get you to remember to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times what I found anyway is when I'm working, and I still have this happen, I'm working and all of a sudden it's 2:00 and I haven't eaten lunch, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, do I make the decision to go ahead and eat something now and then either eat a later dinner, or and I have to go through that decision making process. But the whole squeaky donut thing was to get her to realize, and it was like an auditory thing to realize I need to make a decision here.
Right.
And
Like a
is it an
trigger.
emotion I'm feeling? Is it that I just haven't had time? Whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so I think there's a whole lot, and this could be like 3 or 4 different shows that we talked about this, because food, there's a whole lot of different things that can impact
Mm-hmm.
that. But I think the overall, like looking at your health and what you're wanting to do and setting up, whether it's you want to be active 5 times a week, which is my thing. And Saturday, I didn't have a chance to go to the gym, but I knew I was going to be dancing for an hour and a half nonstop. And I probably sweat more at this event that I went to than I would have at the gym because I was dancing. And, skiing is a big one. And so it's just about adding activity. There's a lot of times during the day that if I walk to Starbucks or I need to go to the post office, I'll walk instead of hop in my car, because that's just adding some activity and it gets me out of my office. So another piece of that, when you're locked in, you feel like you've got all these deadlines, you're messed in, and I get it because everybody's doing it. And frankly, we hold it as a badge of honor.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the sleep thing. It's like, oh, I'm working, blah, blah, blah. I had an employee one time say, oh, I was here for, 60 hours this week. And I finally looked at him and said, when you think about that, what that's telling me is you can't get the job done in 40 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually not a badge of honor. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times that things are out there and it's not realistic for that to be done in 40 hours. Well, that's a different story.
Sure.
That's a different problem to solve. But if it's really that you're kind of saying, oh, it took me this long to get this done, well, okay, are you really able to do the job in 40 hours?
Right.
So again, we're always in cause. And I just look at yeah. So it's all interconnected. Spiritually, like you got to have a spiritual element to this health journey too. It's not just, so it's spiritual, it's mental, along with the physical.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's great because up until now, we haven't really talked about how this is a part of the coaching that you do. And this is a part of what you offer, and that it really is a holistic review for someone. So if someone wanted to know a little bit more about what you've talked about today or wanted to find you, what would be the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, Meredith, I'm gonna suggest two different things. This vitamin regimen that I'm on, I cannot speak highly enough about it. To the lactic acid loss and my, like not being sore, to the energy level and just feeling great.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so organically sourced. I'm just really impressed with them. So if you want more information about that or want to talk to me about that, please private message me in Facebook, or if you're listening to this on iTunes, go to Facebook under Three Vines Consulting and message me, and I'll answer you any questions that you have about it that I can. And then if you want to know more about what I do from a business perspective, go to my website, www.3v as in Victor consulting.com.
Awesome. Well, for this episode, gosh, sorry, now I'm losing my voice there. For this episode of Faith Infused Leadership, I'm your co-host, Meredith Banka, here with your host, Debbie Heiser, and we will see you all again next time.